Hello and welcome to Geek Warning, the podcast that puts the world's most interesting cycling tech into one place. I'm Dave Rome, and this week I'm joined by Ronan McLaughlin, my fellow tech editor. Ronan, welcome.
Thank you.
Brad isn't with us this week. Rather, he's sitting in a corner thinking about the bad things he said about chain waxing based on the request of our members. So Brad will be back next week if he comes to apologize about what he had said. But yeah. Are people going to understand I'm actually joking?
I'm not sure. I don't know if you're joking. So.
Oh, okay. All right.
There is a chance you banished him to a corner somewhere. So let's just leave it at that.
Okay. All right. Fair enough. I owe a little apology to the people that tuned in last week. The audio quality was not good on my end. Part of the problem was that I'd lost my voice, which I have since found. But the other problem was that I may or may not have forgotten to plug in my microphone. So apologies to everyone that listened and persevered through that. But we're back. So, and with that,
Last week was a bit of a shit show in general, given your mic issues, my Wi-Fi connectivity issues. You were very early in the morning and kind of poorly, and I was very late at night, and wanting to be in bed. So apologies if last week's show was not our greatest. You'd
also very casually mentioned that you in 5 hours time needed to go for a bike ride. That bike ride ended up being 19, 20 hours long. So I'm keen to ask you about that, but I think we'll come back to that. It's been on my mind since you did it, so we'll come back to that later in the episode.
Oh, really?
Before we get to that, there's plenty to cover. Trek have just announced a new bike, the merger of the Amonda and Madone back into a single platform. We'll cover that. There's a new chainwear tool from Abbey Bike Tools, and I am keen to discuss how it is measuring chainwear and I guess why it's measuring chainwear in a different way than what every other chain checker is.
I'm keen to hear your take on that, yes.
There's a new Willier, and there's also a bunch of other tech news to get to. So with that,
including a new toaster.
You got a new toaster?
No, there is a new toaster that we're going to talk about later from Wahoo.
Oh. All right. I think we're confusing the heck out of people already. So with that, Let's talk about this new Trek. So basically the Amonda is no longer. The Madone is now the new Amonda, or the new Madone, depending on which way you want to put it. But basically they've lightened the Madone. They've made a more aero Amonda. I don't know what you'd call it. Ronan, what do you think it is?
I think first of all, it's both surprising and also not surprising at all. When we first spotted this bike in December at a Trek training camp, we had sort of mentioned back then that if Trek are going to go the sort of one bike option direction, it would make sense to call that the Madone, because all the other model names are anagrams, is that the word I'm looking for, of the Madone word. So Amonda was Madone, basically backwards. But it seemed like far too soon to be replacing the Gen 7 Madone, given that was only released 2 years ago. An SL version of that bike was only released like literally less than 12 months ago. And
yet here we are.
Here we are, exactly. And I am surprised, interested, and to be honest, kind of a little bit disappointed. But I do think, as I said to you in a message at some point, that Trek are probably going to sell a heck of a lot of these things.
And I think they're certainly risking a lot by taking two, what you'd assume are successful bike lines, and merging them into one. Like, they kind of have to make this work. There's a lot riding on this, so to speak. And so I've written something about it on escapecollective.com. It's a first impressions piece. I have ridden the bike a few times, but I did decide, because of some injury, to leave the full review for a later date. So we're trying to currently get Ronan a test bike, and I think it's
on the way.
Route. Oh, it's en route. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So a further review. We'll follow. But I guess, yeah, some brief highlights of this new bike. I guess from a technical point of view, Trek are claiming that it is as aero as the Madone it replaces, but at the weight of the Amondo it replaces. And when you look at it, they've basically taken the rough aesthetic of the Madone. It's got that ISO flow hole in the seat tube, which is unmistakable. But yeah, otherwise it's less drastic in terms of aerodynamic shaping when compared to that Gen 7 Madone. So the tube shapes are shallower, notably at the seat tube, the down tube, and at the fork blades. And yeah, weight has sort of been saved everywhere, including internally. They've got a new higher end carbon fiber layup, a new 900 series OCLV that's being used. They've introduced a few newer manufacturing techniques. For example, the fork is now molded as a single piece, and there's quite a bit of weight saved out of the fork as a result of that. They've lightened the one-piece handlebar. But yeah, when you're, I guess, getting into the nitty-gritty details of it, there's, yeah, I guess more questions than answers at this moment, because the claim of it being as aero as the Madone before it is based on the use of these new aero water bottles that come with the bike. But they haven't included the aero water bottles on the previous Madone when making that claim. So, yeah, Ronan, what do you think of that?
I think clearly that's going to be quite frustrating to anybody who wanted actual data on how the frames compare. I think somewhat surprisingly to myself, and not to forgive what Trek have done there, but I can kind of see past it, not because it's okay, but because it's the same kind of tricks we see every brand play with.
Yeah, it is.
Changing wheels or changing handlebars or aero or weight savings coming from elements of a new bike that are not the frame and fork. And so it's a little bit closer to the line of what's acceptable, given that it's bottles and bottle cages. But effectively it's the same thing if you whittle it down far enough. Like the Trek haven't actually changed the wheels on this new Madone versus the old Madone. So do we give them a buy ball and finding aero gains in bottles? I'm not sure if we can or not, but at the same time, yeah, there's nothing going on here that other brands are not doing, I don't think.
Correct. Yeah, so those bottles, they have admitted, improved the aerodynamics on every single bike they tested them on, but they were specifically designed for this new Gen 8 Madone, where they help to, I guess, create this consistent airfoil shape from the front of the bike through to the rear of the bike. So if you were to take a cross section of the bike, it cut the bike in half, look downwards, it does sort of create this pretty smooth wing-like shape when you've got those bottles in place. And yeah, so I guess that's the question mark for me is if those bottles improve the aerodynamics on every bike they're fitted to, then how much faster is the Gen 7 Madone with the new bottles fitted versus the new Gen 8 Madone? And I guess, yeah, we don't have that data. It's probably 1 to 2 watts based on some assumptions. And I guess, yeah, the thicker tube profiles of the deeper tube profiles of that Gen 7 Madone, at least according to Trek's own data, do seem to get better as the yaw angles increase. So once you get above sort of like 10 degrees of yaw angle, then that older bike does seem to excel. But more straighter on, then that new one sort of seems to hold its own. So, yeah.
What was interesting to me from the aero data that we'd seen in the press material that was sent to us was that the old Amondo was like so far behind the Gen 7 and Gen 8 Madone, and they were like, quite close, which I mean is not surprising at all.
No, that Amondo is not known to be a fast bike in the wind.
I think what is, I don't know if interesting is the word, maybe disappointing, is the weights of the new bike, and that like if you're going to go in this direction and you're going to sacrifice aero, and at least visually speaking, the Gen 7 Madone ticked all the aero boxes. And interesting to me that the Gen 7, you just look at it and visually speaking, at least it ticked all the aero boxes.
Yeah.
The Gen 8 doesn't so much, and where other brands have sort of gone in that same direction, sort of sacrificing some aero, there have been, let's say, significant weight savings, getting much closer to 6.8. Whereas with this new Gen 8 Madone, they're still not getting all that close to Gen 8. From when I've read your article, it's, fully built bike, you're still half a kilo off the 6.8 UCI limit.
I mean, I tested the SLR 9, which is the top end build. It's a full SRAM red axis equipped bike. It's top end Bontrager wheels, Pirelli 28mm tires. You're locked in with the seat post of choice. You're kind of locked in with the cockpit as well because you're using the bike's aero one-piece handlebar. And it was 7.1 kilograms with cages, included bike computer, but without pedals. So
there was a computer mount or a computer included?
Computer mount.
Okay. Sorry, you just said computer.
So their own computer mount. I mean, let's call it a race-ready bike in terms of including the cages, power meter, all that. Without without the pedals. So let's say 7.3, perhaps 7.4, depending on your pedal choice. And that is a top-end bike. So you can get lighter in wheels. I'm happy to admit that. There are lighter wheels out there. But you're already spending a pretty premium for this bike, and it's half a kilogram above the UCI weight limit once you add pedals. So,
and my thing about that is that for the vast majority of us, that it will matter in that when you pick the bike up, you want it to be as light as possible. When you spend this kind of money, you want to pick it up and feel like it is super light. But actually, in terms of performance, for the vast majority of people, even ourselves included, if we were buying this bike, it's not going to make a performance difference. But when you take the option of what, at least visually looking, was a very aerodynamic Gen 7 Madone and a lighter Emonda, and you take those two options away and you just give the pros a single option that is neither lighter nor more aero, I kind of feel bad for the pros in this one, in that they're not really getting a lighter bike, which is definitely what they would be demanding. I guess they're also not getting a more aero bike.
I guess it depends what you're comparing it to. I mean, if you assume all the pros on that team wanted to be on the Madone, they just wanted it lighter, then they've kind of been given that. If you assume that they wanted a bike that's as light as it can be, as close to 6.8 kilogram limit, but more aero than the Emonda, then sure. I think they're probably feeling a little bit hard done by.
I'm confused.
Why is that?
I lost track of what you were saying there somewhere, but I know there are a mix of demands on that team from there are some riders who would only ride the Emonda, and there are some riders who would always ride the Madone. Now they've only got one option.
Yeah. Yep. So I mean, some other details on this bike before, there is something that you're touching on there, Ronan, which I'd like to come back to. But firstly, Trek killed the Emonda to make this bike happen. They've basically halved their bike range, but then they've found other efficiencies. So they've actually gone from having 8 frame sizes down to 6, and they've gone from having numerical sizes, so like 52, 54, 56, to alpha, so medium, large, extra large. Fewer sizes, one less bike, a few fewer color options as well per model of bike. There's a lot of efficiencies here, and I guess where I'm going with that is, like, do you think that the idea of having one race bike is better for racers, or is this purely a move to benefit the retailers?
Are you trying to trigger me? Are you trying to get me? I think we have to set the racers aside in this conversation, because with the varied terrain that they ride on, I just don't believe that there can be a single solution.
Okay.
If we're talking paying customers and bike shops, and even if we want to touch on the pro teams, I think we have to consider mechanics.
Let's say amateur racers then.
Yeah.
Someone that has to buy this bike that wants to still pin on a number.
If we assume that the majority of amateur racing probably isn't tackling Alpine and Pyrenean calls, it's difficult to answer because I haven't ridden the new bike. But if we assume that the majority of amateur racing is probably flatter, higher speed scenarios. I'm still not sure. The point I was going to get to though is that I think if you're a Trek dealer or a Trek customer, or maybe you're not a Trek customer, maybe you're just a new bike customer, and you're walking into a shop, and the Trek dealer is showing you've got this Madone, it's a little bit heavier, but it's faster on the flats, or you've got this Amonda, and it's a bit lighter, or you've got this, pick any other brand that only does one offering. This one does both. It's just like, I'm not saying this is maybe our audience, but there probably is a considerable, probably the biggest chunk of the customer base that just wants to not have to make those sorts of decisions and just wants this will do both.
It makes the sale easy.
Yeah, and I think that's a big part of that here. And I as much as I don't believe in the one bike solution, and I think pros need different options, I don't think that's wrong from Trek either. I think it's just a reality of modern the industry as it is today.
Yeah, I feel like whether you think there's demand for a bike like the Amonda, which focuses on weight, and then there's separate demand for a heavier Madone that really prioritizes aero over the weight. Ignoring that, I still question how sustainable of a business that is to have both of those options across a full spread of complete bikes options plus the color options that they had. Trek have privately, but it became public knowledge that they were making concerted efforts to greatly reduce the number of product units that they had within internally. They got quite bloated. They had too many options, and this is a perfect example of it. Like having 5 different color options in a single model of a Monda with, do the math on that, 5 color options, single model of Monda, plus 8 sizes in that, plus you've got all the other models, plus you've got all the Madones. Like, it's just insane. And the chance of,
At the moment in time that you're looking to buy a new bike, it is great. Yeah. But I think if you zoom out and look at the bigger picture, that undoubtedly brings in extra cost and extra, just longer term, that is not great for, even for consumers in that.
Yeah, the likelihood of having that bike for a consumer when they walk into a store is so low. Like in the color that they've set their mind on, in the size they need, in the model they want. Like, it's just the chances of actually stocking all of that is so low. So if you're more than halving those options, your chance of success of selling a bike goes way up. So
the other thing that I have in my notes here to sort of mention or sort of ask you is just how much do you think that actually we're talking about the demand for 2 separate bikes, but if we just categorize them as road performance bikes, how much do you think a drop in demand for that actual category is also a huge factor here? In that, like, everybody I know is buying gravel bikes, not road bikes.
Yeah, I think it's a huge factor. I think if we look at other brands who have done this, Specialized is the most obvious. I think they were pretty early to react, and I think other brands have kind of waited to see what the category does and whether it turns around. And unfortunately, I think seeing Trek make this move is probably proof that the category hasn't turned around.
I'm disappointed that Trek have sort of that's the 2 bike approach, but I'm not surprised, and I can't really hold it against them either. Like, I think we're at the point now where it's surprising that brands are sticking with multiple options, and we're going to discuss one of those later with the new Willier. But that is, I think that is the outlier now, rather than when Specialized first did it. Was like, people are still not happy about the veins disappearing.
Yeah. And I think some of these brands have forced it upon themselves where the models are not differentiated enough. Like, if there's only 200 grams difference between your aero bike and the lightweight bike, then that's not enough for a customer to, make that decision, if that makes sense. But if if you do have a genuinely lightweight climber bike these days, and then you do have a bike that looks and tests to be a genuine aero bike, like I'm thinking probably Cervelo R Series versus S Series, that still makes sense. You can understand how that brand can still offer those 2 models. But at the same time, I question, I'd be very intrigued to hear their sales figures on how many soloists, which is kind of like a middle ground bike, how many soloists they're selling versus an R series versus the S series. I think it would probably be making a case for not necessarily having so many models.
Yeah, like it was great to see the soloist return a couple of years ago, but do we think that those three options stick around for much longer? It's kind of hard to see it happening, isn't it?
Yeah. So anyway, head to escapecollective.com to read all about the Trek. There are some really cool details in this bike. I believe it's the first bike in the World Tour to go to a UDH hangar. So there's a lot to like in this one, and I'm very keen, Ronan, for you to get yours assembled and built up, and keen to hear your thoughts on it. But yeah, one that I dare say is not going to change the market, change the world. It's a good bike, but it's perhaps not breaking any new ground in what it's achieving.
I think we've finished up on the Madone, so I'm going to give us a bit of a segue here, Dave. Yeah. In that I think the other thing about having two bikes is that with aero bikes getting so close, and you almost admitted it there, actually, if you think back to what you just said, or maybe listen back to this podcast when it's published, with aero bikes getting closer and closer to 6.8, if there was only 100 or 200 grams between the light bike and the aero bike for the pros, it's more difficult to justify having two bikes. But I think you meant it in the way that the do it all bike is the option. But that to me sounds like, well, if there's only 200 grams in it, then why would you ever consider a non-fully aero bike? Anyway, the point I was going to
from racing, I agree. Yeah,
and for the pros, the point I'm trying to get to is that I have the new Willier Verticale SLR in here, and Willier is one of the brands who are sticking with an aero bike and a climbing bike, and this is their new climbing bike replacing the Zero SLR. I've had it here for about 3 weeks, and I also went on a bit of a press trip to try it out. The way I was going to segue this, and this is the longest, worst segue that ever happened.
It's quite the trek.
It's quite the oh, God. I'm not sure what to say off the back of that, but is that this is one bike that, at least in the stock build as supplied to me, it's a lightweight climbing bike that's not really quite lightweight enough to really differentiate as far as I can see it.
How much does it weigh?
So my size large Verticale with the what they call Hulk green paint job, which is kind of their launch paint job. It's also the heaviest by I think 80 grams heavier than the standard paint job. So that it's by no means the lightest paint, and it's also got the Mieke Kleos. It's the RD36 wheel set, which is also not the lightest, but without pedals and without cages, this is 6.8 kilos, and there are zero aero attributes to this bike whatsoever. And at that point, admittedly, the pros will probably get the weight down maybe another 100 grams with lighter wheels. And absolutely, to Willier's credit, they could have stuck, very narrow tires and a tiny cassette on this to keep the weight down, but instead they've put 30mm Vittoria Corsa Pros on it, and they've put an 1134 cassette, which again is it's, if you're buying this bike, it's what you want, but it's certainly not the lightest, and so out of the box it weighs 6.8 instead of 6.6 or something. Sure. But yeah, it's like I was expecting it to be lighter when it's a lightweight dedicated climbing bike with no aero about it. You don't really want to be seeing 6.8 when you throw it on the
and
scales,
what is it? Is SRAM Red Access? Is it Durace with that? Yeah.
It's Durace. Yeah.
Okay.
Now, as I said, building it up, I did stick a set of lighter climbing wheels, MV 2.3s on it, and they had Conti GP TT 28mm tires with an 1130 cassette, and I think it was like 300 grams I was saving at that point. So then you're down to 6.5. If you went for one of the lighter paint jobs, you're maybe close to 6.4 at that point. And
What is this, the Weight Weenies podcast?
This kind of is turning into the Weight Weenies podcast, but it's just it's a bike that I can't really. It's as I've said in the review that should be live on escapecollective.com by now. It's a bike I'm not sure has a place in the modern peloton, but of all the bikes in the peloton, it's one of the few that I'd spend my own money on.
Interesting. Would you put it in a similar category to like an Athos?
This is the thing, you really have to put it in that category, don't you? I mean, it's classically shaped. It's not quite round tubes, but it's almost round tubes.
Gotcha.
There's nothing aero about it. It does have full internal cable routing, so that's definitely different than the Athos. But it's just not quite as light. It's 720 grams, if I remember correctly, for the frame. So it's not really in the same category in terms of weight.
D-shaped C-post?
It's not. It's using a mostly round, not quite round.
Okay.
I'd forgotten how frustrating it is to get your saddle perfectly straight with a round seat post. That's something I've had to get used to again. But no, it's not. It's not using a D-shaped seat post now.
Okay. All right. Any details on it you feel like we should know?
So it might be surprising there that I said it's of all the bikes in the peloton, it's probably one that I'd spend my own money on. And that's
it must ride very nicely, I'm guessing.
It does. I certainly wouldn't have it for racing, and I think that's a bit of a presumably Groupama and Astana are pressurizing Willier to make a bike like this with just all in on weight savings and no consideration for aero. And I think that's a mistake on their behalf. Like even on the climbing stages, the pros are climbing so fast these days.
Yeah,
aero does matter,
and then they're descending.
Yeah, exactly. Like there are stages that are somewhat finishes, but they're few and far between.
Sure.
And you also have to get there. Anyway, the reason I like this bike so much is just because it rides so well. It would definitely be on my list of bikes I'd consider if I was buying a bike for, just for the enjoyment of riding and not for racing. It's stiff and light as you would expect, and you sort of get the properties you would expect with a stiff and light frame. And what I especially like about it is just how sort of composed and precise it is descending. Like I used it for that 400 kilometer ride I did last week, and there's so many variables at play, but anyway, I'll say it anyway. But like I think it was like 14 hours into the ride, I took a KOM on a descent, and I specifically remember just having a lot of fun on that descent. And that's not a sensation you get in every bike, so it's worth mentioning.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So yeah, I mean, it sounds a lot like an Athos in terms of having a ride quality that sort of encourages you to spend longer on it. Perhaps a ride quality that is mostly achieved through making the bike less stiff, if it's anything like an Athos.
No, this is pretty stiff. I mean, it's
okay.
Yeah. There's not much in the way of in terms of compliance or.
Okay, well that's a difference. Sounds kind of like Willier have created a bike from 2015, and you like it, and you really like it.
there was a lot of talk about Pantani in both the press materials, the videos, and even the location we went to. We went to Monte Campagna, which is Pantani's old training ground in San Marino, and that was not by chance. In terms of what Willier have created, they've updated the Zero, which was a climbing bike beforehand. I think it's a much better looking bike, and I like that they made it. I'm just not sure exactly how much sense it makes for their pro teams who they have made it for.
Yeah, okay. But perhaps as a punter bike for someone that wants a lighter weight road bike and doesn't necessarily care fully about aerodynamics, even though they probably should. It could be.
Yeah, I mean, like, I don't know. I think there's plenty of people who care about aerodynamics who probably shouldn't.
Yeah, okay. Interesting.
This is maybe the bike for them.
Okay. I'm in the camp of just ignoring modern understanding of mathematics and physics and science, and still picking bikes that defy aerodynamics in order yeah, I still, like, I'm looking above my head here, and it's just I'm on a round tube steel frame out of choice, and if I could build that bike again, I would probably pick a round tubed carbon bike. So I'm probably the customer for this.
And I think that's what this Willier does. It's like they've. One thing I forgot to mention about the Madone is that I'm surprised that they haven't gone like the slimmer and thinner route in terms of like head tube width and seat tube width, and because that's a direction that a lot of other brands are going in terms of aero savings. Yeah. But that's very much what Willier have done with this bike, and what you get as a result is a bike that looks very much like a 1980s steel round tubed bike, and it's much more than that, but you get that sort of aesthetic, which I think is really pleasing.
Okay. Oh, choice is a good thing. I think I'm happy that bikes like this are still being made, and I guess another thing to add in as a bonus for Willier is they are doing some of the nicest paint out there. So they are making very attractive looking bikes. I'll give them that. So, all right. Well, yeah, another one to head to the website for to check out to see what it looks like. I will do just that because I actually haven't seen what this bike looks like.
It's very green.
Very green. Hulk-like.
Very, very green.
Away from the road bikes, getting into the workshop, Abbey Bike Tools, they have a new tool. This one's been a long time coming, actually. I've got a prototype that I've been playing with for some time. They've got a chainwear tool. They haven't done one before. It's called the LL chainwear tool, and that stands for linear and lateral chainwear. So yeah, I mean, if you imagine typical chainwear tools, they're measuring elongation of the chain, so the growing length of the chain, and a lot of them are trying to measure how much distance has been created from one pin to another across the chain, and that elongation wear is the sort of wear that causes cog wear. So you get skipping on your cogs when that elongation wear gets too great. Basically what happens is as the chain wears, it no longer sits into the base of the cog, and it rides higher and higher up on the cog until it eventually skips over the edge of the tooth. But Abbey Bike Tools, their tool does do that. It offers a check on elongation wear, and it sort of has this these holes that you align with the pin, and it's meant to be very accurate, and it is designed to capture the whole roller and give a very centered approach to measuring chain wear, and it's designed to sort of overcome the inaccuracy issues of measuring all different types of chains, predominantly new Axis flat top, which have a larger roller, which throw off the measurement on a lot of chain tools. So that element of it's nice, but then they also had a second measurement, which is the lateral chain wear. And basically that's measuring kind of like the flop of the chain. So if you were to take a chain off the bike and then lay it flat. Yeah, it's exactly cross-chaining. Yeah, so this measurement can only be done with the chain off the bike. Shop mechanics would have previously done it by putting basically the chain on the bench and seeing how much the chain wraps around toward itself. But yeah, this tool has a little gauge that lets you measure how much lateral wear in the chain has occurred, and it doesn't necessarily impact the longevity of your drivetrain, but lateral wear has a direct impact in the shift speed, shift effectiveness of your drivetrain. So as a chain gets laterally worn, it gets floppy, and then every time you shift, the chain doesn't have the same sort of like reactiveness to move across to the next cog. And that's what this chain tool is aiming to tell you. I think it's interesting. I don't think we have necessarily enough data to know when a chain has reached its lateral wear point, or at what point you should replace a chain at this, but I suspect we're going to get there.
I was slightly depressed watching the video demonstration of this new chain tool, in that when measured linearly, the chain seemed fine, and then when checked laterally, it seemed to be worn. So
this is something that's come up I've only really heard it third hand, and I've never been able to get any confirmation from it, but SRAM chains, their new flat top hard chrome chains, are so incredibly durable now that SRAM themselves have kind of teased the fact that maybe elongation wear is no longer a necessary measurement, that their chain will basically last as long as a chainring or cassette will last. And then at that point, you just replace the lot and you start again. And that's, I'm not going to say is an official company line at the moment because it's a bit polarizing, but I've heard some hints towards this. But what does wear is, the chain wears laterally, where shift speed will be impacted sooner than your traditional drivetrain wear, and that's where a tool like this could come in handy.
Am I right in thinking though that lateral wear isn't going to result in a chain breaking the same way as linear wear would? So it's not really a safety issue; it's more a performance thing.
No, and I think even linear wear, aka elongation, I think is also not necessarily going to cause a risk of chain breakage until it's way, way, way overcooked, like, way past the point of it skipping. It's basically at a point where you're going to end up at risk of breaking pins. So no, it's not a safety issue. I think it's purely a shift performance issue. And I think it's...
No, the reason I ask is just that, if you can get so far into a chain that you're basically only replacing them when you're replacing chain rings and cassettes, which I get that you said that's polarizing, but I mean, it's kind of hard to, so long as the chain wear and the chain ring and cassette lasts as long, then the only change there is how often you're changing a chain. And so it is, unless I'm missing something glaringly obvious, that is cheaper overall. You've got a bigger hit on the day, but over the lifetime of a bike, it's cheaper. But the reason
and
I
it's
ask
more
was
reason
just,
to use a great chain lube as well to get the most from all of that.
I was just wondering if there could be like a hidden risk now that if everybody's checking their chains with linear chain checkers, could there be a risk that we can't identify unless you're using one of these lateral wear checkers? But sounds like it's just shifting performance, and you might already feel that, would you?
I think people wouldn't feel it because it would be a gradual degrading of shift performance. So the person owning the bike wouldn't feel it, but I think an experienced mechanic would get in the stand and be like, I can't get this drivetrain to shift as crisply as this drivetrain should feel. And then they'd take the chain off and be like, okay, well, there's your problem. And I think there are a number of experienced mechanics out there that I've known over the years to do this, where they might measure a chain and go, okay, well, elongation wear isn't there because the person riding the bike is 40 kilograms. But the person tells me that they've got thousands and thousands of kilometers on this drivetrain, and that chain is now incredibly floppy in terms of lateral wear, and it doesn't shift very nicely. And they'll do a new chain despite the traditional wear not requiring it. But the result is a bike that feels and shifts like new again. So I think some mechanics have been doing this already. It's just, I guess the difference now is that Abbey Bike Tools has kind of provided a gauge to help get an understanding of what that wear looks like or what that wear measures as and how to react to it. So, yeah.
It's interesting you reference the new SRAM flat top chains, because I've definitely had at least once, maybe twice, where I've just been... I thought I was pushing the longevity of a chain and then checking and being surprised that there was basically like zero wear. And I was like at a point where I thought maybe I should be considering replacing this. So that kind of makes a bit more sense now.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Most chain checkers on the market are not compatible with that flat top chain, with that oversized roller.
Yeah.
There are some chain checkers on the market that measure from equal points of the roller, and they're sort of designed around the idea of isolating the roller out of the measurement. In reality, still question marks around whether they work as exactly as claimed. And that's kind of what this Abbey chain checker is aiming to do, is to once again isolate that roller size out of the measurement by having this sort of V groove cut out that you place over the chain. And that's meant to find the dead center of the pin. And then it measures to the next dead center of the pin. Like you're actually lining up the physical pin through little holes to get an understanding of whether the chain is elongated or not. So yeah, I've been playing with it. My eyesight, truthfully, is a bit shoddy, and I find this chain checker fine to use with the chain off the bike and on a bench where you can get it under bright light. But if you were in like a shop environment with the bike leant up against a bench and you're trying to measure the elongation of the chain, I find this chain checker a little bit more cumbersome. Like you're kind of having to get on your knees or put the bike up in a stand before you're going to be able to accurately use it. Abbey Bike Tools do tell me that the production version is more clear to read. There's better clarity and there's better chamfering, so more light comes in, and the fact that it's green now also gives better contrast for the numbers. But yeah, I think it's still a chain tool that I wouldn't say is perfect, but it does answer some common issues. So, but yeah, I think overall, new chain tool or not, I think the discussion of lateral chain wear is very interesting and has been covered before, but finally we have a tool to measure it, and I'm kind of keen to see brands get more into this and give guidelines on over how much lateral wear is considered actually worn and how much is acceptable.
Is the lateral wear indicator just Abbey's thinking on what is wear and what is not wear, or is there like a common?
So. Yeah, I mean they have a rough guideline on where in their scale a chain is worn, and in my mind I think that'll vary based on the manufacturer of chain and the model of chain and how many speed it is. I think an 8-speed chain will have more lateral wear or lateral movement than a 12-speed SRAM chain, but yeah, I think it's a start, but I think over time maybe there can be a community resource of this is for SRAM flat top replace at this point, and for Shimano 12-speed replace at this point. I don't think that would be too difficult or too tall of an ask. So yeah, I'm keen to see where this all goes.
I feel we should move it on, but I have one more question. Is just like,
please,
how much do you think having the chain sort of clean and sterile is going to influence the lateral wear reading? Like I'm picturing if a chain's bunged up with oil and dirt and grit, it's maybe going to.
You bring up a good point,
less.
Which is you're actually meant to degrease the chain prior to measuring it.
Okay.
Especially with this tool. So yes, you actually do. Not only do you need the chain off the bike in order to measure the lateral wear with this tool, it also needs to be degreased, which to me, in a busy workshop environment, in a busy bike shop, that is wasted time. If you measure a chain and the elongation is ever so slightly on the wrong side of where it should be, in my opinion, the shop is better off replacing that chain and not wasting its time cleaning it and then measuring it. I think, for me, I would much rather have a chain checker that I can trust, know when to replace the chain, and just have that conversation with the customer immediately and just say, let's just put a new chain on, rather than removing it from the bike, degreasing it, measuring with this tool, making the decision, and then having to charge the customer for a quick link if their chain isn't. It's
in my head, I'm thinking if you measure it and it's already showing wear, it's only going to show more wear when you clean it. Like, is there? Like,
correct.
Yeah,
Yep. So, yeah. Anyway, I think I enjoy the new tools. I'm not going to say this is a must buy. I think for now, it's a tool that may perhaps raise more questions than provide answers. But I'm also, in the mindset that more information is always good, and I think this tool is a step in the direction of opening up many interesting little rabbit holes. The last bit of big news we have is a bit of sad news, unfortunately. So the long time head of R&D, one of the key people at Merida Bikes, Jurgen Falke, unfortunately has passed away. So he'd been struggling with some health issues for a number of years, and he's a pretty impressive individual. I'd met him a few years ago, and he was very, very instrumental in a number of innovations out of the Merida House of Bikes, and definitely an intelligent human being. So thoughts are with his family during this time. Certainly a a big loss for the industry. Ronan, I don't know if your big ride is still on your mind, but it's certainly on my mind. So yeah, I mean, you just had casually dropped that you're going for a bike ride 5 hours time while we're recording the last podcast. And then the next thing I see is that it's a 400 kilometer, 10,000 meters of climbing.
Yeah.
Monster of a ride.
Yeah.
Why?
Well, coincidentally, the main reason I did it last week was literally just to get it off my mind. Because it had been on my mind for far too long, and I was planning it and optimizing it and strategizing it and all sorts. And then one day last week, I just took a head stagger and I was like, I'll not curse, but I was like, sack it. I just want this thing done. And so instead of doing everything as fast as possible and having support car and all that, I just put a backpack on my back and I put a frame bag on the frame and went and got it done. Last Thursday presented an opportunity and I just had to do it.
It makes so much more sense now over you deliberating which head unit or bike computer you're going to pack, worried about whether it would save the ride or not. And I was just thinking, what ride, surely you don't care that much whether the data is kept, but I guess on a ride like that, you probably do.
I actually really do and care in all rides because I've got like 12 years worth of complete data for every single ride. And while I no longer use any of it, I also don't want to not have that for no good reason. So whenever possible, I'll have at least power and ride data from every ride.
So what computer did you settle on?
All three.
Oh, what's the third one?
I used a Garmin watch also, just to be sure.
Oh, okay. All right. And did any let you down?
The Garmin 1040 did cost me about 15 minutes because the route was so long. It first of all, for some weird unknown reason, it stopped syncing Strava rides the day before I went to do this thing. Strava routes, which it had never done before, was quite panic-inducing that I wasn't going to have the route, because if you've seen the Strava file for this, it was basically the rules of this Everesting Rome 10K challenge are that you have to ride 400 kilometers. You have to ride 10,000 meters of elevation gain. You have 36 hours to complete it. You can sleep if you wish. It can be on two separate rides. But I decided to add in an extra rule or two in that I wanted to not cover the same road more than once in each direction. So no repeats. And I also wanted to start and finish in the same place. And so what that meant was basically covering every climb in the local area. It was as much a navigational challenge as a physical challenge, and that was a lot of fun to plan and ride that on the day. I looked down about 10 hours in and realized I was 6 miles from where I started. That was quite an interesting moment. And so yeah, that was pretty cool. But for whatever reason, the Garmin stopped syncing rides the day before. I'm pretty convinced at this point that Garmin are rolling out a lot of firmware updates. They're causing, let's say, quite a few challenges.
Sure.
And yeah, if you look online last week, you'll see what's rumored to be a new 1050 head unit. I don't know anything about that yet, but it seems like I'm putting two and two together, and perhaps those new firmware updates are designed for a new head unit that doesn't exist yet and confusing old head units. Could be wrong in that, but either way, when finally the 400 kilometer ride did sync to the Garmin then had a heck of a tough time actually loading that ride, and so crashed and froze and all sorts. And I literally spent 15 minutes standing at the side of the road where I'd planned to start this ride, just trying to get the Garmin to turn on. And so to answer your question, I had the 1040 on my handlebars. I had the Coros Jura in a pocket, and I had the Garmin Forerunner watch on my wrist, all three recording. And all three worked fine.
Okay.
Except the Garmin, which randomly dropped power data for 5 minutes at one point, but picked it up again later.
What bike did you ride?
That new Willier.
Okay.
And that was kind of part of it. And that I'd done a 9-hour ride on the Saturday beforehand. And just had enjoyed riding that bike so much that day that I was like, you know what, I'm gonna stick on a set of deeper rims. I used the Synchros Capital SL Aeros, set of wider tires because there were 2 or 3 gravel roads that I needed to sort of cover to get both the elevation, the distance, and then get to other areas that I wanted to get to without doing repeats. I added a frame bag, the lead out gear frame bag, which is, you and I have discussed previously how we don't like adding bags to our frames because our knees rub off them. And I've been having a bit of joy with this one now. They also sent me a top tube bag and a top tube seat post bag. Both of those not as, I just think they're too wide, and so I do get knee rub in those. But this frame bag from Lead Out has been, it's been one of the few bags I can use without being frustrating. So I added that on, and then similar to that whole Trek Madone concept, I added in the Cannondale Aero water bottles from the new Super 6, and told myself that while I wasn't riding an Aero bike in the new Willier, the frame bag and the 2 flat-sided bottles kind of combined to basically just fill in the full inner triangle of the frame. And surely that must be some sort of Aero upgrade.
I would assume you'd still be going without those.
Probably. And then, I mean, like, I definitely wouldn't have finished had I not used I can't even remember the name of them now, but you remember the old Speedplay race day only super light from the Speedplay days, not the Wahoo days, but those super light tie
spindles.
Yeah, they're like literally race day only because they will degrade quite rapidly, and they did degrade over the course of this ride.
Oh wow!
And I just got up at 4 a.m. 5 hours after we finished recording, and got going hoped to get going at 5 a.m. It was like 5:20 or so before I did, but
okay,
and then just knocked it out.
Yeah, right. Anything that didn't work on the tech front?
Not really. Like, I had plans to go one by and all when I was thinking about how fast could you possibly do this thing. In hindsight, I'm kind of glad I didn't, because I mean, there's so much descending. Also, it was just nice to have a big ring option. I used Pirelli's new P0 TLR RS tires, 30mm width, which on those Synchros wheels actually blew up to 32. I was kind of concerned, being a race tire, how they would hold up on what was quite rugged gravel sections, and I did get one puncture, but sealant worked its magic and saved me. Apart from that,
what about chain lube? What did you use there?
So I fully sterilized the chain the night before, and put it into super secret hot melt, the full crock pot approach. It lasted the full 400k, but I kind of wonder if the last 50k might have been technically better with just a drip of wet lube of some sort. But
gotcha.
At that point, I didn't really care.
Was it rainy at all on the day?
No, it was dry through it.
Oh, okay.
So,
all right. Well done.
There were a few periods where it was like misting almost. It was like just like if you see some of the cooling fans that they use these days with mist blowing in them, it was kind of just like that, but it never properly rained. So that's probably why I got the full 400k out of it. All
right. Well done on getting it done and being so casual about it. Did you save it as a morning ride or an afternoon ride?
I give it its title because, I mean, and for anybody who hasn't heard it yet, go check it out. I recorded a podcast with Lachlan Morton the day before. I'd be lying if he wasn't the inspiration for this, but he definitely was inspirational in just having the confidence to go out and do this unsupported. And to be clear, my dad did come out a couple of times when I had told him what I was doing, and him and a friend actually followed me for the final couple of hours. I think it was more because they were worried that it was dark, and
fair.
I had actually wanted to start directly after we finished that Geek Warning recording, but Rachel, my wife, was like, "You're not going out in the middle of the night. No way." So that was the end of that idea.
That would have been the biggest flex ever. Just to hang up from the podcast at midnight and just roll out the door. But anyway.
But yeah, that podcast with Lachlan, he had talked about just, enjoying rides and stuff. And that was kind of, I'd given it this name because literally the only thing I'd done online to mention I was doing this was just putting an Instagram story up, and then a lot of people started mistaking it for another Everesting attempt.
Okay.
And I was for whatever reason, I wanted to make it clear that I wasn't doing another Everesting. And so for that reason, I gave a bit more information. Then later, still to this point, people mistake it for an Everesting. It was an Everesting community challenge, but it was not an Everesting.
Gotcha. Given the hours on the bike, did you have a pair of bib shorts that you were very set in wearing? And this does lead me into a pick one for this week, which is I'm keen to hear if there's a set of bib shorts you would pick for a very long ride.
So I set myself one extra challenge when I decided the time didn't matter anymore, and that was to try to self-shoot and film the whole thing. And so we have a video in the works. And I mean, I didn't really do it for this reason whatsoever, but if I was going to make the video, I, again, wanted to just use it as some sort of an opportunity to, again, just bang that food allergy awareness drum a bit louder. And to do that, I usually wear my red shoes because there's a food allergy awareness charity, Red Sneakers for Oakley. And so just to make the red shoes stick out a bit, I wanted everything else to be black. And as such, I wore a black Castelli race suit, skin suit.
Oh, okay.
So that was sort of a leftover from the days of planning it to do it faster. Also, the speed suit, but it was fine on the day. It was for 18 hours. There was no problems there. Anyway.
Okay. Is that your choice? If you had to pick a bib short to do it all over again, is that?
It's very hard to pick a speed suit for. Pick one bib short because it's just still not the done thing. But I do think there are comfort gains from having race suits or speed suits that perhaps the wider community just isn't ready for yet.
Right. Okay. I might not get a suitable pick one out of you then. If
I did have to pick one, and just coincidentally, so there are long ride specific bib shorts on the market. I know Pactimo used to do one. Assos obviously do a few. Quite often, the endurance comfort is linked to a much thicker chamois, which
it is. Yeah,
typically don't like all that much myself. And so I basically what I just look for is a pair of shorts that are like if they're comfortable for an hour and they should also be comfortable for longer, so long as everything else is like you've got your saddle position, you've got everything else dialed in, you're clean. Obviously, is a big part of it. Let's assume people are. And so the bibs that I like for short periods or short rides are ones that are you can typically forget that you're wearing them because they're just comfortable and they're not tight or they're not restricting on the bibs or they're not restricting around the gripper at the end of the leg or they're. Like you get a lot of bibs that are just have this overall tightness to them, which I really, really don't like.
Compressive, yeah.
Yeah. And so like bibs that I've been enjoying of late, I'm not sure I can give you a pick one, but bibs that I've been enjoying of late are the new Assos S11, which does feature a much thinner insert than all the other Assos bibs I've tested of late. And then the new Castelli Espresso bib shorts, which are very, very soft to touch, very nice, very comfortable. The only thing I don't like about the Assos bibs is the gripper, which they've sort of gone with these little dot gripper things, which, they're the upside is that the upper half of the opening has no grippers on it at all. The downside is that I just don't think it's the optimal solution either way. And then on the Castellis, it doesn't really make a difference, but just where they anchor the strap to the bibs, it's sort of like a dual anchor. And every time I've tried that system, the upper point, the stitching just sort of comes apart in it. And so you're left with a single anchor anyway. It doesn't really affect the functioning of it, but technically speaking, the stitching is giving way, if that makes sense. But still, if I could only pick one pair of bibs from my shorts right now, it would be, or from my drawer right now, it would be either of those two. And regardless of short ride or long ride, that would be my choice.
Gotcha. Yeah, okay. Yeah, I mean, similar themes for me, but for road bibs, I've really taken a liking in recent years to bibs that kind of don't have a traditional leg gripper. They kind of just flow through the entire short as like almost a single panel, and you kind of get like this really uniform fit through the entire leg. So Quore have a model that does that, like their top end model does that, and I believe they also make it for, or they used to make it for Perlizumi, who also had a top end short that had the same sort of fit. And yeah, I guess beyond that, Assos makes my list of bibs that I seek out to spend time in when I know I'm going to be in the saddle for a while. So yeah, my most used bib shorts are actually a gravel cargo bib short, on the assumption that I'm riding gravel bikes or cross-country mountain bikes, and that's the Miele GTC Kaispanzer bib shorts C2. I don't know how they got my Wi-Fi password there, but they managed to. So, but yeah, that's a super comfortable short. The chamois is actually ridiculously thick on that, but doesn't bunch up or feel like a nappy like a really thick chamois typically do. And yeah, it's just got a really nice, yeah, as you say, it's not a compressive feeling short, that one. It actually just feels really, really comfortable. And then it's got these sort of loose mesh pockets that sort of overhang each other. I haven't dropped anything out of them. The things that you put in them don't sort of bounce around either. So it's a very nice short. Obviously not a cheap short, that being Assos, but I've got enough time in them now that I genuinely think I'd buy another pair if I had to. So
yeah. Assos do. I've got a couple of pairs of Assos bibs that have that really thick chamois. Also, they do make the best of that. It's the least cumbersome. Sometimes you find that even just getting into the saddle with a real thick chamois can be less than pleasant. But still, no, all those new S11 bibs that I was talking about there, they have gone with a thinner chamois there, and even Assos equivalent, I still would lean towards the thinner chamois. Yeah, fair enough. With all that, should we move on to some quick tech bits? Yeah, let's do.
What's this new toaster you keep going on about?
The new toaster from Wahoo. It's the tracker toaster.
Okay.
For those of you who are just entirely lost at the moment, one of the early episodes of this,
count me in.
One of the early episodes of this podcast, on a very early segment of On Your Mind, I had complained to great lengths of how much I hate modern heart rate straps because they continually break and fail and just refuse to connect or provide any heart rate data. Kaylee who was on the show at the time, had then said that there's some sort of toaster effect where if you have a toaster from 30, 40 years ago, it probably still works fine. But if you bought one like a year ago, it's about to break. And it's the same thing with heart rate straps. Like when I started cycling 20 odd years ago, I had a Polar watch and strap.
They used to last.
525, and they just, like if I dug out that, I'm pretty sure it would still work.
Yeah.
But my house is coming down with Bluetooth and ANT+ straps that just fail. And actually Wahoo have kind of tackled that, but haven't indirectly with what they're calling a new tracker heart rate strap. The tracker name, this isn't an update of the ticker. This is an entirely new heart rate strap. I think the tracker name will be used a lot more in future. I think they've got like new products within that range planned. But basically, it's what they're claiming is an accurate, comfortable, and crucially rechargeable heart rate strap.
How do you recharge it?
You recharge it with, if anybody's familiar with the Shox headphones, bone conducting headphones, they've got a sort of proprietary charger design, and this like uses just the exact same. Yep, magnetic dock. This new Wahoo strap uses the exact same system. So if you've got one of those Shox headphones and you get one of these heart rate straps, then you've got two chargers instead of one that work with both devices. Claimed battery time on a full charge is 120 hours. Wahoo are claiming all the same accuracy and
that's 5 rides for you.
Reliability in that you would get with other straps. Same connectivity in terms of Bluetooth and Ant Plus. They've done a nice, neat thing in just printing like the Ant Plus sensor ID on the inside of the heart rate pod. And yeah, you've sort of hinted there at one of the questions that I brought up on the press conference webinar for this new strap. And I kind of felt bad afterwards because it was a little bit blunt. I didn't intend to be, but it just came across a bit blunt in that I pointed out that typically, while I definitely welcome a rechargeable battery and the claimed runtime of 100 or 120 hours, whatever it is, the problem for me with heart rate straps over the last number of years is that the heart rate straps don't actually last long enough to drain the battery before they break.
And most of that is ingress of corrosion and sweat into the battery door. So I guess it's too early to know, but if they've sealed the battery door and it's...
So that was my question. Was like, have you done anything else to make this strap more robust? And yeah, I did ask it a bit bluntly. So if you're listening to this, Anna, apologies about that. But basically the response was that they hadn't done anything specifically to make it more robust, but in making it rechargeable, they've been able to move to a completely sealed unit, which means that they're no longer relying on the likes of O-rings and the likes that used to just allow ingress on current heart rate straps. And so the hope is that it should be more durable. I've had 2 rides in this thing. Admittedly, one of them was 18 hours long, and it survived that long. So that is a start.
But realistically, we probably won't know for another 6 months, 9 months until, for how this fares in the market.
Yeah, exactly. It is quite pricey. I think it's around about £80 sterling, if I remember correctly. I mean, you are getting rechargeable, which is just better. Like straight away, we're no longer using single-use batteries.
Sure.
Coin cell batteries aren't the best thing to have about the house, like in our house anyway, with kids and that. But what I did find a bit surprising given the price was that, Wahoo were saying that this isn't really it's kind of just a cycling heart rate strap, and that it obviously will work for running and that, but it doesn't have any storage on it built in to record runs that you can download later.
Sure.
It's IPX7 waterproof, which I sort of wonder, is that enough? Is that part of the reason why heart rate straps are failing? Wahoo have said that it is fine to swim with, but it won't actually transmit underwater. So again, that rules out swimming. And so if you're a triathlete, it's not really a heart rate solution for you. And at that price, I kind of feel like it kind of needs to be, doesn't it?
I don't know. I think there's enough of a market just in cycling alone for people crying out for a heart rate strap that lasts more than 6 months or a year.
Oh, yeah, definitely. I just feel like...
If they've answered that, then,
then
I'm going to be selfish and say screw the people that want to do other sports.
Well, I'm being not selfish, because I'm thinking if you're a triathlete listening to this, you're probably thinking, up until the point that I just mentioned what I just did, you'll be thinking, great, the new heart rate strap, and then you go, oh no, it's not for our sport.
Oh well.
So you have.
Oh well, time will tell if it's worth anything. I guess it sounds positive, but we'll see. There's been other heart rate monitor straps that have since come out in recent time claiming to have solved these issues, and they haven't. So
other thing I might request a bit of feedback on, because I'm not qualified to answer myself, is that in order to improve the accuracy, Wahoo went for larger electrodes and basically more surface area for data collection, sort of, as Wahoo describes it, sort of shields and eliminates the excess noise in your data, in your heart rate data. I do wonder though how compatible that is with a sports bra, because it is kind of it's a more rigid. It's not rigid in any way, but it's more rigid than the previous Wahoo or the Garmin version of a heart rate strap. And so if someone is using a sports bra and has one of these new tracker heart rate monitors, feel free to get in touch and let me know how those two combine together.
Provide some feedback. Yep. All right. Well, yeah, I guess one to watch out for. Also new in the little tech bites world, Wolftooth have mini pumps now. So this one's actually quite exciting. These pumps with a 70 PSI maximum. They're really intended for sort of mountain bike and gravel riders, but those on wider, modern, sort of hookless style tubeless road tires might also be intrigued by it as well. But yeah, basically it's Wolftooth's answer to like the one-up EDC pumps. So they're fully capable mini pumps, but inside they also stash a series of multi-tools within them, which is pretty cool to see some competition there. These are part of the Wolftooth Encase lineup, so they actually are repurposing the multi-tools that Wolftooth currently offers for stashing inside handlebars. So there's one with a chain breaker and a tire plug kit, and then there's also a multi-tool with their tiny little bits and 8mm hex key and swivel bit. So that's sort of like the do-it-all, all your fasteners tool. And there's two sizes of this mini pump. The small one only fits one of these tools, and the bigger of the two fits both of these tools. So, keep an eye out on escapecollective.com. I'm going to actually have a threaded article online by the time you're listening to this, so check out that threaded gallery because, I'll have these pumps within that with all the little details to know.
This pump, I haven't seen it yet. I don't know anything about it other than what you've just said, Dave, but I've seen it in the show notes. And again, it intrigued me because going back to that Lachlan Morton podcast that we recorded last week, that you really should listen to.
Performance Process.
It's on Performance Process. It's also on the sort of everything feed, so the Escape Collective podcast channel. But we were talking about marginal gains, and he really enjoys the marginal gains where you can the functional marginal gains where you can get tools inside a mini pump, and you've got two things doing, or one thing doing two jobs instead of and cutting down what you're carrying in that way. So I don't know if this pump is small enough to tick the bike packing box because I haven't seen it yet, but
it is, and it's very space efficient, and it also from what I've seen at the time of recording this, I still need to test them for efficiency, and that will be included in that threaded article. But it is actually very easy to access. Say you've got a plug kit inside the small pump, it's actually very quick to access that. So there's definitely efficiencies there.
I have always admired, and I think I've mentioned it before, though, the Wolftooth Encase multi-tool that goes into the bar end, the same sort of functional marginal gains things. I think we can all appreciate that.
Yeah. So, and if you've admired that tool, it's literally the same tools, but now on a mini pump. And Wolftooth continuing with their right to repair. It's kind of the thing they do as a brand with everything they make. And these mini pumps are part of that, which means the pumps are entirely rebuildable. They are stocking every single part as part individually for the pumps. And they've got a video showing how to rebuild the pumps with general tools that you can do at home. So I think that's pretty cool. They're not the only ones to do that, but it's rare to have all the parts available individually. So I think that's a really nice feature. The other really cool feature is that they're sealed to the elements. So there's a cool little threaded seal that keeps the pump retained to stop it from extending out. And then there's also a really solid rubber cover that goes over the pump head. So a lot to like in these, and check them out. Also new, Bossi, which is actually a Sydney-based brand near to me. They do titanium bikes, made in Asia but designed in Australia. They've got a new grit gravel bike, which saves a bunch of weight from the previous model, has some cool 3D printed details, some buttered tubing in it, and most importantly, it's now got a chainstay yoke that increases tire clearance. So you can fit up to a 700 by 50mm tire in this bike. It still can handle front derailleurs if you want it. It does have integrated cabling through the headset, but it seems to be a lot to like in this bike. Sort of a simple, elegant titanium bike with all the modern fittings. And then last on the list is just a little tease of what I'm doing this weekend, which is I'm heading back to Melbourne because there's a second handmade bike show happening in Melbourne. I was back there 2 weeks ago for Spoken, and now I'm returning for Made Australia. So Made, the US bike show, they're having a little edition of the Australian version. And expecting to see a handful of builders that I perhaps already covered, but I've spoken to a few and quite a few of them will be showing new bikes and things that I haven't yet seen or haven't yet covered. So expect some further coverage from the handmade Australian bike scene over the next week or so.
Can I update you as to what I'm doing?
Please do.
I'm going for a bike ride in an hour. A lot shorter than last week's bike ride, I can promise that much. No, I'm actually I'm heading to the Tour de France now. I'm not even sure if you know this, Dave.
Is that coming up, is it?
Last minute change of plans, and the tour was always scheduled to happen this weekend, but the change of plans is that I will now be attending stage 1 and stage 2 to check out all the tech goodness on show. And then
what
I'll
do you
be going
think
directly to
you'll
Eurobike. I think I will see lots of carbon fiber bikes.
It sounds like a pretty safe bet.
I think new tires also. New tires.
Okay. Some new tires.
Fuel, I think, probably.
Interesting. Some drop seat stays?
Mm-hmm. More than likely.
Proprietary seat post?
Definitely.
And not too many brake hoses blowing in the wind?
Almost certainly not.
Yeah, okay. And then you said off to Eurobike?
Direct from Italy to Germany to cover Eurobike and then be back Friday week.
All the bikes. I think it's safe to say visit escapecollective.com every day if you care about tech, because it sounds like we'll have plenty to share. Well, thank you, Ronan. It's been great hanging out with you. It's nice that we managed to find a time zone that worked for us. And
I suppose, I can't remember the last time I did a full Geek Warning podcast, but it was good to be regular episode podcast, overdue. I should say, but it was good to be back. Mm-hmm. Great.
All right. Well, yeah, next week I'll probably even have my voice even further back to normal and have plenty to talk about from Melbourne Bike, from Made Australia, and Ronan might have some things to talk about from Eurobike. So yeah, expect us to be back in a week, and there's always more bikes to talk about.
In the meantime, if you're listening to this and you're not a member of Escape Collective, let me just say that if I have to go and do a different job, if Escape Collective does not exist, I cannot sit down for an hour and 24 minutes on a Tuesday morning and record a podcast with Dave Rome talking about all the stuff that we just talked about. And I definitely can't go to Italy to cover the Tour de France, nor Germany to cover Eurobike. And Dave can't go to handmade bike shows in Australia. And so while this podcast is free, it does require each and every one of these listeners out there to sign up at Escape Collective. So,
includes
if you haven't done
Jeff.
so yet, includes who, sorry?
Jeff.
Okay, yes, Jeff, please. It's about time. Come on. We've been doing this for 18 months. Come on.
Well, thank you.
Where can they sign up, Dave?
Can sign up at escapecollective.com/join. And yeah, you'll find all the details there. We have actually, we're in the process, and by the time you're listening to this, we're in the process of simplifying our options. We previously had a few different tiers available, but now there's just really the one. So you just become a member, you get access to everything we do, you feel good about supporting what we do, you get access to our Discord if you want to be in there, where there's quite a cool bit of hidden member chat and a lot of information that doesn't get shared publicly. So yeah, head on over, support what we do, and yeah, you can join either month by month or you can join as a year-long member and save a bit. But certainly your contribution makes a huge difference to allowing us to do what we do. So thank you. Should we call it there?
Let's wrap it up.
Thank you very much. We'll speak to you again next week. Cheers.